and welcome to the Popcorn Bucket List, the podcast that keeps your movie bucket list up to date because those 1,000 movies to see before you die list are just too daunting. I'm your host and John Kramer's new apprentice, Gracie, and with me is Darrell, the overly optimistic detective, and Sarah, who now knows to appreciate her life. How are you guys doing today?
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. Watched a
I'm
lot of
doing
movies.
yes. I've actually been homesick the past 2 days, binging Saw movies, so I apologize ahead of time for my voice being a little off this week.
Well, if you haven't guessed, today we are doing, I guess, our first big deep dive into the horror movie genre. We're talking about everybody's favorite torture porn, in air quotes, movie franchise, the Saw series. For those of you who don't know, this past weekend, the 9th installment of the franchise opened in theaters, titled Spiraled, up from the Book of Saw. I know it's going to be an interesting one. I'm excited to talk about this. But for those who may not have had 2 sick days to watch an entire series, or who, had a whole week to binge watch or rewatch, in my case at least, an entire 9-movie series. The Saw movie franchise tells the story of a notorious serial killer named Jigsaw, who never actually seems to kill anyone. Jigsaw is known for testing his victims and their will to live by putting them through killer games. Haha, the writer must have been really funny there. Most of the time, these games, though, force the victim to inflict great physical pain upon themselves to survive. The original series consisted of 7 movies released over 7 consecutive years, all released on Halloween weekend. The franchise was revived in 2017 with Jigsaw, a somewhat standalone film that had a more modern look and feel. Spiral from the Book of Saw released over this past weekend with a saddening $8.7 million. Considering the first film in 2004 opened with a whopping $18 million in comparison, it's actually pretty tragic. I'm going to toss it up to one, bad reviews, which I never say take horror movie reviews with a grain of salt, because I think that everybody thinks of horror movies differently. So if you're taking those bad reviews from Saw and going, oh, I don't want to see it, I don't recommend that. I definitely recommend seeing it in theaters. But yeah, it's sad because it's pandemic numbers, and this is the first film that I can recall having to go to theaters to see in the last year, because most of the movies have been releasing on theaters and HBO Max or Netflix or Disney Plus or things like that. And so we had to go see this one in theaters. There was no other real way to watch it. So it was kind of saddening to see. So I'm hoping for a better second weekend numbers, but who knows? We'll see. But
Time.
yeah, only time will tell if this will stand the test of time like the rest of the series. I would love to talk to you guys, just to start off. We're all of the age where Saw films were coming out in our adolescent years. They came out between 2004 and 2010, the originals. Were you guys fans of the films when they came out?
I actually did not watch them when they came out. I remember hearing about them, and I knew they were gory. And then I remember hearing that they were bad, as the sequels came out, and it's they're not worth a watch. Only watch the first one. And I waited so long. I think I was either in college or maybe even graduated by the time that I saw the first Saw, and I really liked it when I saw it. I was like, oh man, I wish I hadn't waited so long. But I guess I'm also kind of glad that I did, because I probably wouldn't have appreciated it when I was younger anyway. Um, and then I watched 2 and 3, and they were fine. And then I remember Jigsaw coming out, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll go see it. And I don't think I saw it in theaters, but I'm pretty sure I saw it shortly after it came out. And yeah, I changed my thoughts on Jigsaw after watching the full franchise, because after only watching 1, 2, and 3 and then watching Jigsaw, I was like, that was kind of cool. That was fun. That was all over the place. And then I like watched the whole franchise and I was like, that didn't make any sense. And then I liked it a lot less after like seeing all of the movies. So, yeah.
That's interesting. Because for me, I had never seen a single Saw film until last week. And have now seen every single one. So I've seen all 9 of the movies now. Me and Grace did a rewatch for her and a watch just for me. So it was an interesting experience because growing up, I also had heard of it and heard like, oh yeah, they're gory, they're torture porny, and I was like, I don't know if I want to watch that, and so I never watched it until last week for this podcast. So now I'm a Saw expert. um, I guess unexpectedly so because I liked the first one. Although my biggest complaint about the first one was like I would have loved this if I saw it when I was like 14 and I was also 2000 I was 14 in 2004. I probably would have loved it. But I was like 8 I think or something like that. So and Saw 2 actually like the sequel better a little bit just cuz I was like, "Oh, it's like an actual movie now." But I appreciate what like James Wan and Lee Winnell did with that first film. It's really cool. They were just like, we're gonna make it short. Oh wow, you guys actually like this? Let's make it into a feature. Like that was super cool
Here's
to me.
$1 million in 18 days, make a movie.
Yeah, literally. And it's like reading about the movie, I was like, oh, this is the reason why the movie looks like this. They had 18 days and they didn't get all the footage they needed, so that's why it looks super, super like just all over the place. It's because we just had to reuse footage or stuff.
Yeah.
It was fascinating, and watching all the movies in order was interesting because I didn't realize how big the lore was. I thought it was
So
mostly
big.
just the traps, and it's like the story is weird. It's very, very expansive, very, very confusing. Um, it's hard to you can't even recommend like specific movies because it's like if you're not gonna get it if you don't watch the other 4 before it or something like that. So it was an interesting experience, and I'm glad that I've finally seen them, and I know everything about these movies. Don't at
Yeah.
me.
I remember I was in the middle of them, like trying to hurry up and finish them, and I didn't know if I was going to be going into work and if I should just, hit the highlights. And y'all were like, skip 5, just watch 6. And then you were like, wait, don't do that. You won't know what's going on.
Yeah,
So I watched
that's
all
how
of
they
them.
work.
Yeah. I was definitely too young for the original like group of like maybe 5 when they came out. But I really remember getting into them in high school because I thought they were the perfect high school like movie night. You go over to your friend's house kind of thing because they were super plot heavy. And then all we had to worry about was the blood and gore of the traps. So we could like talk through the whole movie and then just like ooh and ah and scream and ooh, ouch, during like the 10-minute trap scene. Actually, I don't think I saw a Saw movie in theaters until 2014 when I saw the 10th anniversary edition of Saw when it came
Oh.
out. I was a big fan of it in college. It was something I think I just admired James Wan and Lee Winnell. They were big inspiration for my thesis, and I just loved their story of like coming out of college, pitching a movie with a short film, and they were the dream. Like that's the dream. They accomplished it. And I think that was probably why I admired the Saw film so much, because upon reflection, I actually didn't enjoy the first one that much. And I was reading James Wan even said that he was like, yeah, like it's made by a kid who didn't know anything. The script was not good, and obviously there are certain techniques used in the film that aren't very good, and even the acting is very questionable, which is heartbreaking.
Questionable is a very uh
I'm
pleasant
giving
way to say it.
I'm giving Danny Glover the benefit of like he gets at least, to make it questionable because he was good. I
Yeah, he
thought.
was good.
um
Carrie Elways, I
it
was
was
surprised. I
yeah.
was like, I know you can act.
Yeah. But even James Wan says like it feels like a kid making a movie with, a small budget. Like it feels like that. And I was like, okay, so if you're watching it to like understand, James Wan, I think it's a great way to start off. And then obviously I had seen various Saw films. I don't think I watched them in order the first time I saw them. I think I didn't watch them in order until probably my last year of college, probably for my thesis, even though I don't think I included any of them in my thesis. I probably did it more for, a paper about the rating system. And then I got to rewatch them with Darrell, which was so much fun because I got to like revisit the story. Because if you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't have been able to like tell you anything about the plot, but now I'm like all for it. Like I'll give you the John Kramer lore. Let me go. Like, let's go. But yeah, I was always a big fan of the Saw films. I mean, at least in my entire like movie loving experience. I wish I had been of the age, but also I'm kind of glad I wasn't because I get to appreciate for what it is now, I guess. So not being huge fans of the film, I'd love to just talk about what we thought of Spiral real quick. I know Darrell and I like binged the whole series and then went and saw Spiral. Like we pretty much did like one night, two another night, 3 and 4 another night, 5, 6, and 7. The next night, and then we did 5, 6, 7, and 8. We did
Yeah,
four
we did 4 movies on
movies.
Saturday, and
Oh,
then we just did the
jeez.
one the next
It was
day.
a long day, guys.
Yeah.
I honestly though they're pretty easy to binge because they're short films. They're not like it's not like you're watching like a Kubrick film and like 3 Kubrick films in a row.
It's not heavy.
No, you could if you wanted to binge these because they're all about an hour and a half, give or take a few minutes between them. Like it's not. I don't know. But I want to know what you guys thought of Spiral. I'm interested because Darrell and I saw it together, and then Sarah, you saw it and then went back and watched some of the other films.
Yeah, I watched Spiral first this week and then watched the other films after.
Which I think would be an interesting way to watch it because, I mean, not knowing, like, one thing I thought was cool is that it didn't feel like a soft, like, one of our biggest complaints, I think, Darrell and I, when we were doing our rewatch, is that they spend a lot of time retelling you what happened in the last movie.
Yes.
Or in the movie. They do like a flashback through the whole movie, and it's a very Saw thing. I've only ever seen it done in Saw like that kind of storytelling where they treat you as an audience as really stupid, or like, hey, we know you weren't paying attention, so this big reveal is because of all this stuff that happened. I felt like it was cool because Spiral didn't do that. It didn't have the like, oh, let's tell you the whole story about Jigsaw. Let's tell you, like, I don't even think they mentioned John Kramer's name until like 30 minutes into the movie.
Like,
yeah.
They show like a picture of him like on
like
a
his
magazine
Life
cover,
magazine.
and that was it.
Yeah. So it didn't treat its audience as stupid, which I really appreciated. Because I like when horror films go, okay, our audience knows the series. They're coming to see this because they know the series. And I don't know. What did you guys think? Let me pass on the mic.
Well,
okay, you go first.
Okay, well, overall, I of the 9 movies, it was definitely in like the higher tier for me. I thought it was better than a lot of the other movies, for a few reasons. One was that I liked that it kind of ignored a lot of, I don't want to say ignored the plots from the other ones, because it's not like it's not in the same universe. It's just that it doesn't reference it constantly, kind of as you just discussed. It doesn't constantly say like, hey, remember all these little details from the previous film that don't really matter to this film. They don't put it in there, which is awesome, because you can just enjoy the story for what it is. It's also very much about Chris Rock's character. The other movies tend to be about like 4 or 5 different people at once. It's typically about the victim of John Kramer's trap, John Kramer himself, whether or not he's alive or dead in the series, it doesn't matter. It's always about him. And then typically like someone who's actually detective, or somebody who's like one of Saw's accomplices. But this one was all about just Chris Rock just being like, I guess I gotta figure this out, which was really nice. It was also, for the first time in the series, I like genuinely laughed because something was funny.
It was really clever script.
Yeah, and it's like Chris Rock, so you're like, oh, of course there's gonna be some humor, but it was like, and I still find this funny, because I told Gracie as soon as we walked out, it was like, there's a scene between Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson, who plays Chris Rock's dad in the movie. And when they're having this conversation, me and the black guy who was sitting a couple seats next to me, we were just laughing, because I was like, I recognize this conversation, or at least this type of conversation. Like I've dealt with this as well. And it's just so funny, because it's like, yeah, that tone. My dad has that same tone when he talks to me sometimes, and it's like, I was like, I can relate to this movie. I didn't think I'd ever be able to relate to a Saw movie, so that was points for it. But overall, it was the story was actually somewhat easy to follow. It wasn't like just a bunch of ridiculous things happening. It felt much more cohesive. It was very modern. All the Saw films up until Jigsaw looked very, very grungy, which is just part of the aesthetic, and I'm fine with that, because like the first film looks like that, and so they kept that through all of them. It was just kind of nice to see like this kind of story just in a more modern context, and actually feel like a genuine kind of mystery. I feel like Jigsaw, which also was more modern looking, didn't have that same level of mystery. It just kind of was all over the place. Let's just say it was just
it was like one of my biggest complaints about Jigsaw. Like I was like, okay, I can write off all the plot issues that I had with it. I didn't like the way it looked. It looked too modern, I guess, was like the way it didn't look like the style of horror that I wanted when I go see a Saw film. But I guess the whole point is because Jigsaw was supposed to be a standalone film. It's not Saw, but it was Saw. I don't know why they advertised it as standalone, because it literally fits perfectly into the Saw franchise, whereas like Spiral takes place 10 years after.
Yeah, Spiral is like completely separate basically. It's in that universe, but that's it.
And looking back on it now, I think they're trying to trick the viewer into like, oh, it's so modern, but when you're actually watching it and can we do a spoiler alert? Let's do spoiler alert for Jigsaw. If you haven't seen
for
it,
the whole franchise, really. Sorry.
For the whole franchise, sorry. John Kramer dies, but doesn't die. He still manages to be the main character for all the films. If you didn't hear me
say that already, he's dead.
But Jigsaw, you watch the whole film in like the certain order, thinking that it's going to be linear, and then you find out that the traps that you've been watching happened like 10 years ago.
Even there's flat screens all over the place.
Yes, and which was my I digress.
If you're gonna make it, be consistent.
But I guess it was trying to fool you, and then that had my whole issue of when does Saw take place. But we don't need to talk about that, because I could go into like a whole thing about that, because I was trying to figure out like what the time frame is, because it could have been timeless up until, Saw 5, when they bring up the fact that it was the year of the pig when he makes his first kill.
Yeah.
And that's why the pig mask exists. And I'm like, it didn't have to be the year of the pig.
Yeah, it could have just been a pig mask.
Yeah, a pig mask.
It's like
I never once questioned the pig thing. I just assumed that he had done something with pigs at some point. Like, nothing Black Mirror-y, but you know.
Black Mirror.
You know, I just assumed he had built a warehouse that was meant for pig slaughter. I don't know. so yeah, the timing of the films are a little weird, especially because they have flat screens in them. So if you wanted to say 2007, I think I looked it up. It was 1995 was the year of the pig, 2007 and 2019. And so if you wanted to say, it would have been the whole thing had started in 2007, which doesn't track at all.
Actually,
So,
yeah, that is that is a huge.
His first kill would have been in either 1995 or 2007, but that doesn't track with the Jigsaw having flat screens.
See, that's the thing when you start discussing the plot of the movies too much. Yes. That's what happens.
And
that's
I definitely don't recommend looking into it like that. I think there are other things you can read into about the Saw films than when it takes place.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I like Spiral in general. It's like, that doesn't matter. I'm just like, thank you for not letting it matter.
You also made a comment about how it didn't look grungy. I thought it fit perfectly for a modern Saw film because
it looks how it's supposed to look.
They made it a plot point of why it looked like the way it was supposed to look. They were like, oh, we're in the middle of a heat wave. The AC is not working. You know, like
Chris Rock is sweating the whole time.
So I'm like,
which made all of it so much worse. Just thinking about all those bodies and
exactly. And so I was like, okay, so they gave the grunge a reason in its own way. Like I got it. I felt it. And instead of it being like the first one's grungy because it takes place in a bathroom covered in shit, which was literally what the trap was called. It was called Poop Bathroom. I'm pretty sure. But you know, like that was what set the tone of it. And then also because they didn't have enough footage, so they like colored it all weird and they distorted some of the pictures and they darkened the shots because they didn't have sets great. It was really interesting why they made the first one look the way they did. But it really sets the tone for the rest of them. So Jigsaw really stands out as uncomfortable to watch, I guess. And then Spiral fits perfectly, I think, in that.
It looks modern, but it also fits the feel of the Saw film in a nice way. So yeah, I mean it's again, it's like it's a very interesting film because it's like a lot of that stuff I think works. I think the only thing I didn't like about the only thing I really found I felt was like about the film was like when it's revealed who the actual killer is of the movie, because it's like a huge problem with the Saw franchise is like the philosophy of characters. Either the philosophy of John Kramer kind of flip-flops a little bit, or all of his accomplices have a completely different philosophy. And it's like the philosophy of the first one where it's like he's going to make you suffer because you don't appreciate your life, and if you get out of this, you will appreciate your life. I like that a lot, but I don't like that it's okay for me that the accomplices drop that because they don't, they're accomplices and they're flawed, they're not the same. But it's weird when in the last movie he's like, that has nothing to do with anything, that's not in the movie at all. And I'm like, that's kind of that was kind of the draw for me to it.
It was interesting that Spiral kind of took its own, and I'd love to get into like, the commentary it makes later, because I have an interesting quote to link that. But I've always liked the idea that it was like, oh, it's rehabilitation. Like in his mind, he's doing what his wife did in a different way. And I love that they bring that up in the story, that it's like, oh, these people, but like it starts off with like druggies and people who are like sex offenders and stuff like that, and it moves on to like shitty lawyers and like it kind of it moves up in scale. Or people who have wronged John Kramer also was a interesting one. It was like the only thing they did was wrong him, that kind of thing. So I agree. I feel like the philosophy flip-flops a lot, but I've always liked the idea that he's a serial killer, but he hasn't killed anybody. He actually,
like, I haven't stabbed anybody today.
He says he despises murderers. Like he literally says, I despise murderers. And I think that's such a great moment where he's like, no, like I don't agree with that. I don't think I should murder anyone. And like Amanda's in there like stabbing people,
Yeah, it's like, but the shotgun trap here could definitely, it can kill you.
Yeah.
I will not personally pull the
Yes.
trigger. It's
Yeah.
like the most flimsy legal defense of all time.
Sarah, what did you think of Spiral?
I really liked a lot of it, and then there was some parts I didn't like. I really liked the way it looked. Like I don't know, it was shot really cool, and like the first like time that I was actually thinking about the shot was after the first trap with the tongue, and the like camera looks straight into his jaw when they're like looking at the body, and like it was just such a weirdly pretty shot for how gross it was. I was just like, whoa. I did really like the way it looked, and I liked that you really felt the heat of it too. I think my biggest gripe with it was how obvious it was who the killer was. Like, is
Yeah.
literally the
Yeah.
only like murder they didn't show. I was like, oh, it's him. Like as soon
Yeah.
as that happened, I was like, it's that guy. And then like other things started to like piece together, and I was like, I'm normally not this good at piecing movies together. Like honestly,
Yeah.
I am
Same
the
here.
actual worst. Like I'll be watching Scooby-Doo and I'm like, what? It was who? But
it was the
like,
only other character you've met in the entire 20-minute episode.
right? But like this, I was just like, so much of it, I was just like already there when it was like coming out. Like it was like, oh, all the bodies are falling, I'll be going for your head. And I was like, oh, head of department. Like it just immediately went straight there. I was like, I
Yeah.
was like piecing everything together as it came about, and like I guess was kind of like, yay me. But the fact that it was that easy to was kind of like
I thought the
upsetting.
reason behind it was a nice twist because I didn't call that.
Yeah.
So
I
Yeah, that was a
like
surprise.
I know we're trying to be like super delicate with how we talk about this film, and because it did just come out this weekend, so we don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it. And also because we don't assume that everybody gets to go to the movie theaters in the middle of a pandemic. So we'll try and be super light with spoilers and stuff like that, but I will agree with Sarah, like it was super obvious who it was once you got to like I think like trap 2. Like I feel like once you got to trap 2 you're like, oh okay, this makes sense. But like it didn't make sense yet why. You didn't get the why until the very end, and I liked that. So which interesting, because now I'm seeing other layers among the ending that are really cool, and I feel like this is the first film that we haven't been able to like talk about because it's not widely released yet. So I'm like, because even Mortal Kombat we could talk about because it was HBO Max, that
Yeah.
kind of. But now I'm like, oh, we have to be
The
careful.
plot's not important in Mortal Kombat
Yeah,
at all.
no,
So.
not at
Right.
all.
But I did like the way it like stood alone, and I liked. I think that's what like they like. I think Jigsaw kind of flopped for that reason. Like it was like, oh great, John Kramer again. Like this felt so much like a Saw movie without really mentioning him very much. And
Yeah,
I
they
really
don't
liked that.
mention
Like
him
the
at all.
traps were so good. I loved the traps in Spiral. Like I was like sitting on my seat, like just like ugh, like cringing, and like the gore was insane, and like just some
Honestly,
of the
my
traps
biggest
were really
complaint
good.
was that you didn't get enough of the traps. I felt like it was,
they were a little short.
but we were also talking about it and this leads to my next question, is that all the Saw films are super plot heavy. And like the traps are very short scenes, like very quick. Of the hour and 30, you probably get maybe 30 minutes of trap.
I think I watched a video and they said that the traps took up like 10% of the first movie, like not including them like just being in that room, obviously.
Yeah.
But like the actual traps happening were like 10 minutes.
Yeah. And that makes sense to me because like I don't know, it like I think unless they were like the one, I think 3 and 4 had the most consistent, 3, 4, maybe 5 had like the most consistent traps. Like it was like trap scene after trap scene after trap scene. But even then it was like intermediate, like, we had to sit through like a flashback or we have to see why we're doing this or that kind of thing. And that's like the biggest complaint I had about Spiral, is I kind of wanted a little bit more of the trap. But that actually leads me to my next question. I remember the films being described, and we've even mentioned it as torture porn, air quotes, or gore porn, very early on into the franchise reviews. It's probably why I wasn't allowed to watch them or didn't have any interest to see them, because they were called gore porn. The term was actually coined to describe, and I thought this was interesting, Eli Roth's Hostel in 2005, which didn't come out until a year after the first Saw film. The franchise was lumped into that subgenre pretty quickly, though. If you want a definition, according to Steve Jones, the writer of The Lexicon of Offense, The Meanings of Torture, Porn, and Torture Porn, which I think is a great title, defines the term as depictions of violence, gore, nudity, torture, mutilation, and sadism. Also like splatter films, which is another subgenre, to the extent to which torture porn lives up to the sensational reputation. So basically it sensationalizes torture, I guess, in its own way. Now, taking into consideration some of the other films that we've seen, or I don't know, I'm assuming I've seen, that are within the subgenre of what is now known as torture porn, such as Hostel or Human Centipede, or a film I haven't seen yet because I know of its notoriety or infamy, a Serbian film. Would you consider the Saw franchise to be lumped in the subgenre of torture porn? Long start to that question, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, for those movies, like when I went going into it, I was like, well, that's what they call them, so that must be what they are. But like watching, like if we start like the first film, there's actually like very little gore and violence in it. It's more, I think the idea of saying that it's torture porn by saying that like it's an exploitative way of showing torture. You can torture somebody without actually like physically harming them. And in the first Saw film, a lot of the torture is more psychological because they're just trapped in a room with a saw, and it's like, you might have to cut off your leg to get out of here, and they're just freaking out the whole time.
If you really think about it, that's the first time you really see someone do anything torturous, because like the first trap of the film you see is
the razor blade one, right?
The razor blade, which you really only see like a weird cut of it. Like you don't see a whole hell of a lot. The second one is the fire wax one.
Yeah, the flammable jelly.
Yeah. And then Amanda makes it through her, so you don't see anything. You see her stabbing somebody, but that's about it. And I think that's what's the other
even
trap?
In that scene, like the most is like she pulls like the key or something out of the guy's stomach.
Yeah, which I found out was pig intestines.
Yeah,
I don't even think you see Dr. Lawrence like cut his foot off.
You don't see the shotgun
splattering.
That was like a big thing, is when the detective's head gets shot from above.
You never see it.
You don't see it. All you see is blood dripping.
Yeah, because I think I commented, I was like, oh man, I wish you saw that.
Yeah, Darrell was like, I wish you'd saw that. I was like, why?
Because gosh, like,
I mean,
yeah.
when I watch the movies, like, because I just watched like all the Dawn of the Dead movies recently, and they have such cool practical effects.
It's interesting that you brought that up, because George A. Romero, who is the inventor of the splatter film, technically hates the Saw films.
That's so funny, because like when I
he says they lack substance and metaphor, which I think is funny, because I think Saw has a lot of substance and metaphor for like the reason why they put them through torture. I mean, that's like the whole point.
Yeah,
is the philosophy behind it. And I'm like, sir.
I mean, like,
that's master.
I guess that is kind of funny I mean, I guess
Sorry, I
because
wanted to
for
throw
his
that.
films, I always see. I mean, I like that.
That was a fun
Because it's really
tidbit.
funny. It's funny that he just didn't like them. It's hilarious to me because like watching his movies, it's like his movies were so violent and gory, but had like so many cool practical effects. Like in like Day of the Dead, a guy just like walking around, like his tongue is hanging out of his mouth, and he's like, "Arr!" Or like head just like exploding and stuff, and it's so cool. But you get very little of that in the Saw films overall. They either
Yeah.
don't show the violence or they only show you the aftermath of the violence. They show the torturous part. People are like, "Oh my god, I'm about to get killed or about to get cut in half or something."
You see the
Um,
panic.
yeah, you see the panic, but at least in the earlier films, you rarely actually saw the actual act of it happening. They did start to show it more often, um, but like for me, like the biggest thing in the second film, there's one part that made me uncomfortable in the second film was the opening trap. So the guy has like this trap around his head, and it's a death mask. It'll close on your face unless you can get this key. And where's the key? It's hidden behind his eye. And so he's given like this knife, and it's like you lose your eye, get the key out, and you can get out of this. That made me uncomfortable because I was like, oh my god, they're gonna show him cutting his eye. He doesn't do it. He doesn't
See,
do it.
and to me, that's like the one where I'm like, oh, that's the easiest one. You just pluck out your eye. Like we learned that in self-defense. It doesn't take much to pluck out your eye, but whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't. But that was one where I was like, that was a lot of. I mean, I guess plot wise, it's the reason why they wanted to kill him off. But also, I
Yeah.
was like, I guess I saw it and I thought to myself, huh, that was a lot of restraint to not show that. And that's
Yeah,
kind of
they
what
get
made me
really
think,
close.
yeah, like I rethought the idea of like it being torture porn. I was like, it's like yes and no because sometimes they're really into it, other times they're just like we just want you to see the characters panic and freak out. And we'll show you like a guy getting cut in half, but I don't know, like to me that's not the part that hits me the most
It
at
doesn't really
all.
become really like glorification of blood and gore until later. Like I would say in like 4 or 5, maybe.
Hmm.
Obviously 2 is pretty gory, but I think 2 is gory because it's dealing with like a dirty sequence. Like
Yeah,
the setting is like a house, and it's supposed to probably be
like
like
a crack
a
house
crack house
probably.
kind of thing. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting topic, torture porn, because it's not something that, well, the other thing is, and I'd love to hear Sarah, because we were talking about this, about it also insinuates that you see a lot of nudity. And I think I could count on one hand how many times you see nudity in the Saw franchise. I know you see a very pretty gratuitous one of in 3,
Hmm.
right? 3?
Yeah, the woman hanging in the freezer and you can see her and she's like fully naked. That's
Yeah,
like
that's
that's like the
Yeah.
one. That's the
one.
first time you see it. And then you get John Kramer's ball sack in 4.
Yeah.
Finally,
And
after all
that's
this
a
time.
corpse. It was supposed to be a corpse.
Yeah.
And then did we figure out if there was another one? Because I feel like I remember
I
going,
don't
oh,
I
remember
don't think
seeing
I
one.
don't think there was. I think it was just the boobs and the balls. I think that's all we
Yeah.
got.
and so like to me it's like, well, the idea of that, is it porn, like the nudity part of it is definitely not, like I get it being glorified of torture, like I get where you could come across as that, but because they're so plot heavy, to me it never came across as that. I
Yeah.
never felt like it was glorifying. Maybe it's because there is this idea of like, oh well, maybe you do like appreciate your life more. I mean, that's like the whole point of a near death experience, is that you learn to appreciate your life. Sure, you don't have to go through a torture scene, but like, you know, maybe that's why they call it torture porn. Some people, and a lot of the reviewers, the critics, I mean, the critics were never kind to Saw films ever. I mean, that's why I was like, don't take what they're saying about Spiral unless it's a horror critic, then you can take it seriously, because they've never liked the Saw films because they're cash grabs. I mean, I'll be honest, they're cash
Yeah.
grabs. Up until 6, they were making so much money for like how little they took to produce versus how much they were making, it's ridiculous. It's crazy. And I feel like in Spiral, it really felt like super honest to that. It didn't feel like super, like, I think there was a couple drone shots, which are cheaper to make now, obviously. And then, I mean, you get well-known actors, which I was also just not something normal for Saw films. I think if you really think about it, aside from Carrie Elwes
Yeah,
and
Carrie Elwes, Danny
Glover,
Glover. You had nobody famous for a long time, really.
yeah, and then you get Chris Rock and
Yeah,
Samuel L.
all of a
Jackson.
sudden you get Chris Rock.
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, like that right there just says a lot. Like you get through 9 films before you get like an actual lead character that you recognize. Like, sure, there's the who's it, the detective, the brother of Marky Mark.
Oh, Donnie
Oh,
Wahlberg.
Donnie
Donnie
Wahlberg,
Wahlberg, yeah. Marky Mark, because we had the whole discussion about Marky Mark in the middle of Saw 2.
And it wasn't even about, it was about Clueless, I think, was the reason why we brought it up. It was
Oh,
Clueless or 10 Things I Hate About You. It was one of those movies. That's why I
yeah.
brought him up.
Yeah, they were like, oh, he's such a Marky Mark or something like that. And then we were like, oh, Donnie Wahlberg's in
Yeah,
this
it's
one.
like...
But yeah, I think it's an interesting genre, especially because I've seen worse films. Like I've seen more graphic films.
Mhm.
And maybe that's, I guess what you decide is graphic. To me, blood and guts has never been very graphic to me. But like, seeing 3 people sewn together in a centipede, that's pretty graphic to me. I mean, like, I watched the whole thing. I didn't turn it off. But like, it's still pretty like tortury. I mean, nudity was in that film a lot because, but I don't know if I would I still don't think that the idea of torture porn I think it's supposed to be negative, and the horror genre just took it, flipped it, and reversed it. and which is very typical of the horror genre. But I was reading an article that a lot of now torture porn subgenres are all in the psychological thriller genre, not in the horror, because it's like all like these there was a list of films that I was like, that's weird. I would never have put that in torture porn. And it was like Law Abiding Citizen and No Country for Old Men. Like it was a bunch of like these
Really?
like interesting films that I would have never have put them in torture. Like, I don't know. It's an interesting, maybe it's just because the plot revolves around torture. And
Yeah.
to some people that's not appropriate. But then what's the point of what did Stephen King, the whole point of art is to offend people.
Yeah.
And I think I agree with that. I mean, I'm not going to call it cinematic and like one of the greatest cinematic films of all time, but if you're into horror and you're into big film franchises, then I would definitely recommend that Saw fits into that and that you should give it the time of day. I don't know, it's an interesting conversation. Sarah, do you feel like torture porn is a qualification, like does Saw qualify in that?
I'm wondering if the first one doesn't like lean so heavy into it because of either budget or maybe they were just kind of like trying to tiptoe and see how this did kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like probably mostly budget because some of the later ones I feel like are a little more gratuitous in their gore, like the lasers that cut a guy's face into like 9 pieces and
That was
like
great.
I
don't know
love
what
that.
you
That was
yeah.
That was great.
And the sound effects. Oh my god, I could go on and on about the sound effects in
Yeah.
Saw films, like the
like cutting a
imagine
pineapple.
that. Yeah. That I do agree that they got more gratuitous because they got more money, and so they got more money to get a dummy to saw somebody in half, or I also thought it was maybe a plot point that because the later in the films you get, the less they're John Kramer's traps, they're more his apprentices.
Yeah.
And so there's more vengeance, there's more like you can't escape it. Like, I mean, the whole point of the jigsaw traps is that you have a choice to make.
Yeah, you
like,
can win.
You can win. There is an option for you, but like when Amanda takes over, there's no option. When what's his name? Oh my god, I've lost his name.
Is it like Tap or
No, Tap is Danny Glover.
Sorry, yeah, Donnie Wahlberg.
Wasn't it Mark Hoffman?
Hoffman, thank you.
Hoffman, yes, Hoffman. That's what it was. Mark Hoffman.
When he takes over, it's all vengeance. And that was like the big issue I had with Jigsaw, is they made him vengeful, and I didn't feel like Jigsaw was supposed to be vengeful. I felt like, or John Kramer was supposed to be vengeful. That was like Mark Hoffman's whole thing. I don't know. I think it gets more gory, but I feel like the plot allows it to get more gory, I guess, in its own way.
I mean, if you're talking about like, I guess like it's not, I mean, I feel like it is still super gory, like compared to a regular film.
Oh, no. Yes, I will agree with you. But let's say The Last House on the Left, you get a 20-minute rape scene.
Yeah, that's
what is gore?
More...
And that came out in the 70s. You know, like
yeah.
Halloween is pretty gory. I mean, he stabs a bunch of co-eds in the stomach, slices them down the stomach. You just don't see the intestines run out.
I think maybe the way he like hangs on to like the torture of each victim may put it into like the torture porn category. Like, you know, you do spend a lot of your time like wondering, feeling, and like in angst, like just waiting to see like what's going to happen with these people. So like it does hang on their torture a lot, even though a lot of it isn't gore. A lot of it is like, hurry up and push that button, oh my god. You know.
Well, I think it's definitely something that like now, like I wouldn't have put Spiral in that. Maybe like 5 I would have considered. 5. Saw 5, 4, 6.
Yeah,
maybe,
I think 6
I would have put there, but I mean like Spiral I didn't. Jigsaw, I could give it that, but
which one was the one with the guy that worked at the healthcare
that
thing?
Was 6.
No.
6.
Yeah, 6. Yeah, that was the better one.
Yeah, that was the better one. You're right.
Yeah,
they kind of blend together.
That one was pretty tortury. They're one long movie. Like, it's weird because they're done by so many different directors. Like, I know that 2, 3, and 4 were done by the same guy that did Spiral. He also
did Spiral, which I was like, I didn't know that. And he's in talks. He would love to do the 10th one because Spiral reinvigorated him. He feels like he can do more with the series now. He stopped doing them because he felt very pigeonholed, which I thought was interesting.
But as like convoluted and like all over the place they were, I feel like Saw through the final chapter were very like cohesive, like a little too cohesive, like what you said. Like they kept reminding you of what happened. Like
they felt like TV
I'm like,
shows.
Which one was that? Because like it just it did feel like maybe watching a long TV show series. Like they didn't feel like separate parts, and it's kind of hard to like pick them apart a little bit because they all just feel like one long story.
Well, because you could say, the house one, and you're like, okay, well, technically 2 takes place at a house, and if you really think about it, 3 and 6 go from room to room, but it's a warehouse. Or a zoo, I think was.
Oh, that's right. The zoo was for the healthcare guy. Number 6.
And
that was a zoo.
Darrell started talking about a snake, and I was like, "What are you talking about, Darrell?" And he was like, "They're at a snake exhibit."
I totally missed that was in a zoo.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's the only reason is because there's a shot of like a snake habitat, like, and that's where when he's making the decision to like let go between the old lady and
that makes sense with the
the screen. Yeah.
The glass.
The glass.
There are a lot of abandoned buildings there, apparently.
Yeah, that was the other thing is we were talking about like where it takes place, and I think we looked it up, and it was supposed to be somewhere in like Portland or Seattle. It was supposed to be somewhere like you know, where
Yeah, I
it's
think it's
super
Washington State
dreary.
or
Yeah,
something.
I don't know, but in my
Someplace no
mind,
one's
I'm
ever
like,
been to.
and it makes sense that he was an architect because he, had access to all these abandoned buildings,
Yeah,
I
out of
guess.
nowhere.
I don't know, but like I feel like at some point you have to have a list of all the abandoned buildings in the area and just know that if there's something going on, if there's a mass
It's
murder
one of these.
there, like let's check all the abandoned buildings,
Because
owned
there are
by
a lot of them,
I don't know.
apparently.
Maybe if there's like a serial killer on the loose for like, years and years at a time, maybe you just have people on the lookout at those abandoned places every now and again. Like I feel like those traps have to take a while to set up and no one like came across him and like
Yeah, the one
okay,
where it
so
was
if
in the
John
seedy
Kramer
motel. Yeah,
Oh,
the one that
yeah.
was in the seedy motel. They were like, "Oh, he had it for 2 weeks. It took him 2 weeks." I'm like, "What 2 weeks? What?"
like can you imagine just John Kramer spends like a week setting up
Holding
some
a book
traps
bag.
in like a warehouse and then what like some homeless guy shows up and then what now you can't murder him because he hates murderers, so what's gonna happen?
Yeah, it's like, well, now I
Here's
gotta put you
20
in the trap
bucks. Go
somehow.
away. Yeah.
Now you gotta learn your lesson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, let's see, what did you do wrong in your life? All right, yeah, that's good
You
enough.
don't appreciate it. Yeah.
Gotta make a whole new trap for you.
But on the note of traps, what was your guys' favorite trap? I have to ask. That's normally the first question when talking about the Saw films.
Yeah.
Is, trap. Like I know I have one where I think I could make it through, but I think there's always the one where you're like, oh, I could do that. And then I'm like, oh, that's pretty sadistic to think about. But I'm like, yeah, I could totally burn my hand with acid and unlock it. But yeah, Darrell, what was your favorite trap? I'd love to hear it.
Well, my favorite trap was in Saw 4, I think. It was the one with the black guy who was the protagonist. He was the police officer,
Yeah, that's 4.
or detective or whatever, who was going around trying to stop all the traps. Because his whole thing was like, so Jigsaw was like, you keep trying to save everybody. Well, see if you can save these people. And so my favorite trap, he finds this married couple who are like held together by these spikes that are just put. It's called the spike trap on the Saw wiki. It's not a very creative name, but
Some
it's
of them
just
are
these,
very creative.
yeah, but it is spikes. So it has basically the woman and the man have spikes going through them, and they're like back to back. And so all the spikes going through the woman are in non-vital areas of her body, but in the guy, they're going through him in vital areas. So it's like basically the only way for you to escape is to definitely kill him, because if you pull these spikes out, he is absolutely going to die. And in front of them, they both have like diagrams so they can see like the parts in their body where the spikes are going, and like this is why this will kill you, because that's like a huge artery. And I guess maybe because I've been playing Resident Evil 8, I'm just like thinking like I love this like weird like video game logic trap kind of thing. It was just something that I felt like, oh, that's really clever, because it's like the thought that went into that. It's like, oh yeah, this will absolutely kill him if you pull them out, but you'll be fine. You'll just bleed a little bit. Um, and I love that the detective comes in and he finds them, and she's like, I just need to get the one spike out. Please help me get it. Like she had gotten all of them out except for one, and it's like, oh cool. Like she went like it's funny because she's like she went for it. She absolutely was like, I'm gonna kill my husband and get myself out of here, because they're in the trap because the husband was abusive to the daughter. He like beat his daughter, and the wife was an enabler. So Jigsaw was like, well, you can finally end this enabling if you just pull those spikes out. So I don't know. That one to me was just interesting because I was like, oh, that's like a cool like just puzzle in general. Or at least it's the basis for a cool puzzle for something. And I like puzzles in video games, so that's why that one resonated with me, I guess.
What about you, Sarah? What's your favorite trap?
Well, that one is a great one. I really enjoyed that one too. And I do like the ones that have to deal with like multiple people. So like my first gut reaction was the flammable jelly, because that one just made me so uncomfortable thinking about like just crouching around with this candle and just like waiting to be set on fire. But Darrell actually mentioned one before we started filming, and I really did like the shotgun carousel.
Yeah,
Like
my runner-up. I love that one.
that one, I feel like that one was really good, and like
That's a very
it's just like
human one.
everybody like yelling at each other and like trying to tell him like, no, this is like why you should save me, and like the chaos, and then him just like, oh god, and like I feel like if it were me, I would have tried to save the last guy just to see like if it was like, oh, maybe if I press it again, like
He'll
like
actually kill him.
he really he just took him at his word, but but no, that one was really good. uh I think, and then I think my runner up is probably the the flesh one, the pounds of flesh, where they
Oh
have to
yeah,
like
yeah.
cut off pieces of themselves, and whoever has the most by at the end of the 60 seconds lives, and like the lady just chops off her arm and the guy's like going away at his stomach. Ugh.
That's got a great moment where she like looks at her stomach and she goes, "Oh my god, I have nothing to chop off. Like I have
I'm
to
too
go for both.
toned.
I'm too toned."
I also don't want to ruin any of the ones in Spiral, but I really did like the the first two a
The first
lot.
two were really good. Yeah. See,
Yeah.
I like the last one. I thought the last one was just perfect.
I don't,
Is the
yeah, the last
perfect
one was really, really
ending.
good too. I feel
Yeah.
like that guy,
Oof.
he did not want anyone to live. He didn't give anyone enough time. Like everyone
No.
kind
Oh,
of
not at
tried,
all.
and they were like, nah, you're not getting enough time for this to actually work. Like this is
Yeah.
just, you're dying. But
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Which is kind of why he doesn't work as a villain for me, because it's like, again, his philosophy is it's just too like, I don't care. I want you
Yeah.
dead.
Like I
Yeah.
hate you. All things are this. All right, we could talk about it. I feel like, but like the commentary is about cops. I mean, that's basically what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's an interesting social commentary to have for a Saw film.
Yeah, since they're not really known for that.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then it's very
A lot of the
specific social
protagonists
commentary.
are detectives, and like,
Yeah,
Mhm.
but
so
it was very interesting. The basically the you know it's all cops going through the test, I guess, is like the best way to go through it. And there's a lot of like I guess things, current events and social commentary about what's going on, and it's a lot for the film, but it also I thought it towed the line really well, where it wasn't like too preachy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I
Do
guess
you agree with that?
for me it felt like,
They
I
hinted at
guess
it.
I guess in this day and age, when talking about that kind of stuff, my only thing is like, I need you to pick, like I need you to decide. Like I
Yeah.
can't, I don't really want it to toe the line. It's like, I want you to pick. Yes, are you going to talk about this, or are you not going to talk about it?
Yeah.
And I felt they weren't really sure what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So it was
So
inoffensive, but it was also kind of like, you gotta. I need you to take a side, take a legitimate stand.
oh, and I think
wow, a Saw movie being non-offensive. It's like you're
Wow,
already in our
wow!
face
In
with all the
one
blood and
way,
gore.
I
Just
in
think
one
lean.
way,
it has a reason to not take a side, because it has, Chris Rock's character who's on one side, and he's also on the other side. Like he's, faced the hardships of both sides almost. And then you have the, big bad who is like on this side. And you're like, where does the audience fall? And I feel like that's one of the cool things about Spiral, is it really makes you question. I mean, like that's like the thing about Saw films, is it's like you're like watching, what is it, 4, when it's like a sexual predator or something like that, and you're like, yeah, murder him, like rip all his limbs off, like he's a jackass. Or like the insurance guy, I'm like, yes, pour the
yeah, he
acid on
sucks.
him, he sucks. Like, it's definitely, and maybe that's why it's torture porn, is because you some of the traps you're rooting for them to get killed.
Yeah, weirdly
Yeah.
enough.
I think you have to do that to make a film. Like you have to make the philosophy work. You have to, not cherish your life. And I think that they find different ways for people to not cherish their life. And I think that's like Jigsaw's motto is like, you don't appreciate your life. Hopefully, if you make it past this, you will.
Yeah.
And I think.
What was your favorite trap, Grace?
Yeah, we never asked you.
So I have like the ones that make me cringe still, and like Darrell was like making fun of me because there was like one that I was like physically getting ill, and it was the pig vat one, where like the pig stuff was just going all up in the skies. Can't.
I could smell that. Like
the other one that still gives me the chills is the hair pulling one where they scalp the girl through her ponytail.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that one.
And
that's
I don't know if Darrell noticed this. I have to take my hair out of a ponytail. Every time I watch that, I try and like pull my hair out because I'm like, I feel it. I can feel it on my hairline. And I'm like, ow, ow. And yeah, that one just cringes. But my favorite, I think, out of all of them is probably the angel wings one, which is the one where the rib cage like rips
that
open.
One I like a lot.
I think
that
it's
was
just
the
really
first one I like commented like I like that.
Yeah, I think it's just really it's a really pretty trap.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely, and then I don't know. I like the classic bear trap, the reverse bear trap. I think that's always fun. I think that imagery of like only being able to see her eyes is a really cool moment. And I think that's probably why. And then the other one I was telling Darrell, my favorite is the ice block one, which is really not even where he's standing. So he's standing on a melting block of ice. And there are ice blocks also melting above him. And he never had a hope to win. I mean, he never did. But like, they just like, I love that. Because like you think it's going to go one way and then you think he's just going to hang to death because the ice is dripping or melting. And then it turns out to be something completely different. And I love that. So, but I forgot about the freaking see no evil, speak no evil one. That one's also really good. Yeah. I love the scene. That scene. I don't know if they look like they're in an abandoned like. I don't know.
I thought it was like a cemetery.
I thought it was a cemetery when I watched it, like a mausoleum.
Yeah, I thought it was a mausoleum.
And it has this really cool.
I thought it was a bank.
And like it's a really cool moment because like one guy has his eyes sewn shut, the other guy has his mouth sewn shut, and it also had this great moment where he like opens up his mouth, and Darrell and I are, why didn't you do that the first 5 minutes?
Yeah, you wouldn't have had to kill the guy.
But I really like that trap because I just like the play on see no evil, speak no evil kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I also really liked the reverse bear trap, and like it just kept showing up, and I was like, I want to see this thing go off so bad.
Yeah,
and then you finally get to see it. You're like, yes, all right.
Finally, after all this time, after 6
people
movies,
get it off. I'm like, come on, somebody's gotta have this go off on him. I was so waiting for her to get out of it.
It's her,
too,
right?
It's
Jill.
Jill. I was waiting for her to get out of it because
hysterical.
Everyone else.
Oh yeah. Well, and the way Mark Hoffman gets out of it is great. Like,
I love that.
What a way to use it!
But I love how he got out of it.
Yeah,
that's
so
cool.
good.
That's so smart.
Yeah, because like really, Amanda does the trap. Like she gets it. She gets the key. She takes it off. But like Mark Hoffman cheats it, and I think that the moment where it goes, I'm like
It's like the only moment in the movies where someone actually cheats the trap and it escapes. Because in Jigsaw, in like the spiralizer, the woman like puts like that piece of rebar in that motorcycle engine. It stops the spiralizer. So the guy who's hanging there about to get cut off, he's like, "Oh, good, thank you for not like killing me with these things on the side of me." He's waving his arms like crazy, and then of course it turns back on. It destroys him. I hope you like my sound effects.
Very accurate. It's also interesting because you're like, oh, he's a, architect. I mean, he had to have been an engineer as
He was
well.
a
Like,
civil
was
engineer.
he a civil engineer?
Yeah, that's what the top of one of those magazines said. Was like Civil
Okay, because
Engineering Monthly or something.
they said he was an architect in like one of them, and I was like, well, that makes no sense because that's why he owns all the buildings. And I was like, oh, well, he had to have been something else because he makes all these gorgeous traps, And but yeah, there are just some that I like for certain reasons. Others I don't like because they make me cringe. Um, I just like when he gets artsy. I think is probably why I like those. But the end all be all question, guys, are any of these films out of the 9 bucket list material? I'm interested to know what you guys think because I would definitely put 1 on there, and if you watch 1, you have to see what it becomes, and that makes the rest of them on there. I don't recommend binging them per se. It's a long week if you binge them, but I definitely recommend at least seeing the first one just because I have an appreciation for 2 guys who had an idea in college. They did the short film and they pitched it and it got somewhere, and I think they're the dream. And so that also they take this idea, the 2 of them, and it becomes a 9 film franchise, know? Like it's
like
such
the
a
residuals
cool...
on that must be insane.
Yeah. I'm gonna say Saw 1, the original, is definitely bucket list material for like anyone. Like I just think like, if you're just going on like the movies you should watch, I think everyone should see Saw. And then I think I'm gonna put a little asterisk. And I think if you're a horror film buff, if you like horror films, or you like torture porn, or you like, just gory
It's weird
stuff,
if you just like
whatever.
torture porn. Please, no one
Yeah,
ever.
it is. But like, I don't know, they're if you like being uncomfortable, I would
There
say
you
watch
go.
all of them. Yeah.
I would
That's
throw in
interesting.
6.
Yeah, but
I
you
do
can't
like...
just watch 6.
That's
Exactly.
the problem.
That's the issue. Like, I feel like 1 stands alone and you're like, whoa. And then
They
I
say
feel
1
like
through 3 stands alone really well.
Yeah, it feels like a trilogy.
Yeah, because I think that was the original thought, was that it was a trilogy.
Yeah, you can't just watch 6, you will be lost. So
Yeah.
if you watch 1 and you're like, man, I really want to see where this goes, watch them all. Just do it.
Yeah.
But if you watch 1 and you're like, okay, that was a movie, it was good, but not my thing, then like, thanks for watching it and you had a good time. Maybe.
I think you could see Spiral.
Yeah,
without
Spiral
seeing
stands alone
any of
too.
the other ones.
Oh
I
yeah, you
think
could easily watch Spiral without seeing
I don't
the
know
others.
if I would put it on a bucket list though.
I wouldn't.
Like, I liked it.
I would put it on...
if you're interested in it, go see it. It's not bucket list material, but you can watch it without watching all of the songs.
I thought I had a good group of like jump scares and like horror aspects to it. There was like a really good couple of jump scares. I was sitting with
my like knees up to my chest on like I was so uncomfortable watching that. Just like, I don't know if it was just the gore so big right in my face. I was in a tiny little theater and like the screen took up the entire wall and I was just like, eh. But yeah.
I would say, especially if you're not sure if you want to see it or not, I liked it and I definitely recommend it. I recommended it to my neighbor. Shout out to my neighbor who listens to our podcast. If she makes it through this one, I don't know if she will because she doesn't like gory films. But I told her, I was like, I felt like Spiral wasn't as gory as the other ones. I think it has moments, but I feel
some
like
of those shots are just...
but they're quick. They're not. They don't. I don't find that they're residual. I guess
they took their time watching each of that guy's fingers come off.
I
don't know.
She probably won't watch it, but
well, I thought it was actually pretty gory compared to some of the other ones. I don't know. Maybe it was just so in my face and it was so red and it was so gross and like so HD.
that one scene I would say is definitely a lot. If you don't like watching people's fingers get ripped off, I guess. I mean, some people like that kind of thing. I don't know why you would.
The
Um,
tongue.
but when it comes, I guess, in terms of bucket lists, I would definitely say the first one with like a caveat. So, like I said, my experience is different because I saw this. I'm 26 and I just watched it for the first time. This movie came out in 2004, so I watched. I was like, this feels very weird to watch because it's like very clearly like this was a short film they turned into a feature. This is a 2004 short film they turned into a feature. These are amateurs who are kind of making this movie, and it's like from if you are interested in movies from a historical perspective or from a just like seeing someone growing as a filmmaker, definitely check out Saw. That's definitely bucket list. um if you're trying to look for just like a movie in general to watch and you're let me just wait, if you're not into horror, you're not gonna like Saw at all. Like that's, I'm sorry, you're just not gonna like it. So you have to have at least some little liking of horror, and you have to remember that it was a product of its time, so it's going to feel a little
Very
bit different.
product.
It was very cheaply made, so it's not going to be like the highest like film quality movie. But I think that again, just watching a filmmaker grow and seeing how such a tiny little basically personal project becomes like this massive franchise, it's definitely worth a watch if you're into that kind of stuff. So yeah, bucket list, a little bit of a caveat there.
I think that's all we got to talk about today. I mean, I could talk about Saw for hours and hours and hours because that's me, but I don't want to bore you guys to tears. But I guess there's no movie news this week. I know they're in talks of doing a Saw X, but I don't want to get my hopes up because Spiral didn't do that well in its opening weekend. So fingers crossed I'll get more Saw movies. And then maybe we can revisit, talk a little bit more of that lore. I don't know. Maybe we could do like a philosophy of Saw kind of thing. That would be kind of fun.
Oh, okay.
But that's probably all we got to talk about this week. I know I could talk about it for hours on end, but you can find me anywhere you see fit at Gracie May with a Y and 3 E's, and my name is Gracie. If you've forgotten, that was stupid. Let me do that again. Leave it in. My name is Gracie, and you can find me at Gracie May with a Y and 3 E's anywhere you see fit. Darrell, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Darrell. That's Darth as in Vader Mall or Sidious, take your pick. And Darrell, it's Darrell. I don't really post there a whole lot, but I exist there sometimes. I like to see people share stuff with me. So.
And what about you, Sarah?
I am snotty_person on Twitter and snotty.person on Instagram, and that's snotty with an IE instead of a Y.
Check us out for all the latest movie news. We're trying to get a little bit better on Instagram and Twitter. I know because movie news isn't really we haven't gotten there. We really just advertise for our show. But we'll try and get better. That's on me. That's on me. I know. If you want to find us on Instagram, we are at the Popcorn Bucket List. And then on Twitter, we're at TPB_podcasts. Or you could just search us in a search bar, like a normal person, and tune in to our YouTube channel if you want to see our beautiful faces. I got our lights fixed finally. We'll be uploading the video version of the podcast on Fridays. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys next week, and I am excited to start going to the movie theaters again. Yay!
Finally.
Finally, a year later. But bye, guys.
Goodbye, everyone.